Welcome to the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. We're going to explore ways to sharpen our diagnostic skills, find learning resources, and hear from experts in the automotive field.
Hey, have you ever been faced with the challenge of sourcing, installing, and programming a used control module in a vehicle? I know a lot of us have. It seems to be happening more and more often today with the volume of control modules on vehicles, the cost of some new ones, or even the availability of new control modules. In some cases, used may be the only option. So what do you do here? I strongly recommend checking out SJ Auto Solutions and Tommy Oliva. Tommy offers a cloning service for used control modules to make these things plug and play for the vehicle that you're working on. In a lot of cases, he is also able to source the control modules if you're unable to locate one for the vehicle that you're working on. But once you get connected with Tommy, he's going to offer fantastic support from start to finish to make sure that that control module is going to work in your application. He's also got tech support that he offers through his website, along with some free resources there as well on information about used control module programming. So make sure to check out SJ Auto Solutions. I can't recommend that enough. Hey, what's going on, automotive world? Welcome to another episode of the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. My name is Sean Tipping, and I will be your host once again for this week's episode. Thank you so much for joining me. On the show this week, I'm going to do a little bit of a recap of 2024, some reflections on some things that I learned from the past year. And what this really stemmed from was sitting down and focusing on my 2025 goals, both personal and for the business. And I will not bore you with all the details of my personal and business goals. I'll share a few, but really the thing that I wanted to talk about was goal setting in general for the coming year. So, obviously New Year's resolutions have been around for a long time and people have various opinions on them. I've been one of those people in the past, definitely, where I'll have one or two things that I want to shoot for, like, I want to, lose 10 pounds or something like that. Or I'm not going to be drinking alcohol anymore. I'm quitting this thing that I do, whatever it is, right? Ending a habit. Stop spending money on blank. Yeah, I've done that in the past years. And generally speaking, like most people, New Year's resolutions last a month, maybe two, and then they just sort of fall back into whatever pattern that you had previously. That motivation or determination that you have on the first of the year, it's a clean slate, and it is a good time to really restart and maybe try to kick some things that you don't want in your life or improve some things that need to be improved. But that feeling, that motivation fades after time, like most motivation, right? They say discipline is really the key. I'm involved a lot in the fitness world and listen to a lot of people there, and that's the key for long-term success. Is the motivation is going to fade. It's having the discipline to keep the things going, and that's the tough part, right? Discipline over a long period is a lot tougher than that burst of motivation that you have when you initially set out on a goal. So anyways, my point there being is New Year's resolutions. I've tried them in the past and been limited on the success, which I would imagine a lot of you listening can probably share in that, like most people. So what I'm focusing on this year, and I've kind of done this in the past to a degree, but I'm really putting some thought and effort into it this year more than I have in the past, is setting goals for the year and really asking myself, well, why do you want to achieve these things in 2025? And how are you going to do it? And we'll talk more about that, but that's what I wanted to share with you on the show today, is really about goal setting for the coming year. And again, it's first of the year. It is a great time to do it, to look forward, and to look back on the previous year is kind of where I wanted to start. as we get older, the time goes by faster. I can't believe it's already been a year. When I really look back at it, I look on January 1 of 24. I'm like, boy, that doesn't feel like it was that long ago. It feels like this year just flew by. And of course, that's just kind of the way time works as you get older. But looking back on the last 12 months and what's happened, what's been good, what's been bad, what was I successful at, what did I miss the mark on? But then also, kind of assessing my mindset at the beginning of 24 is like, what did I really set out to do? Or did I have goals in place? Was I just kind of winging it? And hey, I'm pretty good at that. So definitely winged it on some stuff. But using what I look back on 24 to then set some goals for myself in 25. And again, putting some more thought and effort into it. And I wanted to share with everybody kind of the process behind that. So first thing, I'll go over a few things in 24 that were notable, maybe some lessons I learned, some things that I did that really stood out and made the year. When I look back in 5 years and I think about 2024, like what happened that year that was a highlight that really identifies that year, right? You probably have that for multiple years within your life going back. Like I'll think of 2008, I bought my first house. Like that, if somebody says 2008, that's what I think of. 2004, okay, I graduated high school. That's what I think about when I think about 2004. That's the highlight of the year. And there might be multiple ones, but usually you have something, right? 2020, COVID, right? Unfortunately, but that's what everybody from our generation will always think when someone says 2020. So what do I look back on 24 as a highlight? For me, this year, it was going to Australia. For me, an absolute once in a lifetime opportunity and trip to go to another continent across the Pacific Ocean, to meet some amazingly fantastic people, extremely generous, and such a beautiful country. It was amazing. I'm not really that big into traveling, not that big into flying. I don't generally get into that, but I get the, hey, go travel and see different places and see the world. It is really cool to see another country, to get to meet people there, explore the city, see what they have to offer. Now, Sydney, Australia is an amazingly beautiful place, and I'm sure not everywhere you go in the world is quite like that, but I get the idea of traveling and seeing new things and experiencing new cultures. Absolutely amazing. So if you get the chance to go somewhere and you may be like, oh, I don't like traveling, I like where I'm at, I got everything here. That's me a little while back. Just ignore that. Go try it. Go do it. Get out there and see the rest of the world. It is so cool. But again, that's my highlight for 2024. So what is yours? What do you think in 5 years you will think of when someone says 2024? What happened? Did you start a business? Did you have a kid? Did you get married? Right? Obviously, those are the big ones. But I would say every year has its marker that's going to stick out in your mind. And that's it for me for this year. And on that note of getting the opportunity to go to Australia, one of the things that really resonated with me after getting to meet and talk with so many people down there is the value of sharing your passion with the world in whatever way that you are able, right? Everybody's passionate and gets excited about something. And the great part about this world is that's different for everybody. Everybody is good at a different thing in a different way. Now, you're going to find some other people that are also interested and passionate about the same things you are, but you need to share that with the world, put it out there in one way or another to really find your people. And that's what I was lucky enough to get to do by, putting the podcast and sharing the excitement I have for what I do with the world. I was able to, meet my people essentially, and they'll be in places that you'll never guess, right? I would have never guessed that I would be training at an automotive event in Melbourne, Australia. That it would have never come up on my assumptions of things that would come from starting a dumb podcast, but it did. And really all that is genuinely is if you have a passion, you're good about something, you get excited about something, find a way to share that in some manner, shape, or form. And in today's world, there's so many options for that, right? You don't have to start a podcast. You don't necessarily have to have a YouTube channel. You could just get involved with a group, right? Some sort of online community, whether that's a page on something like Facebook or some sort of chat group, or even going to an event in person and meeting people. Now, obviously, this is the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast, and I'm referencing things that relate to the automotive world, but hey, maybe it's something else for you. Maybe this is just one thing you're kind of interested in. You're listening to a podcast about it, but your real big interest is plants. Like you really enjoy gardening and plants, right? Well, you can probably find your people out there one way or another, some sort of group, some sort of community that's out there that shares that passion with you. But again, you got to get out there. You got to put what you have out into the world in one shape or another. And I just encourage everybody to do that if you have the chance to. It can definitely be scary. There's lots of reasons to not do it, but I would encourage everybody to at least give it a try in whatever really excites you and revs your engine, gets you going. The next thing I got on my list here is kind of the inverse from that in a way. It's that if you're doing something that, well, maybe it's not terrible. Obviously, if it's awful and terrible and you hate every second of it, stop doing that thing. But maybe you're doing something on a regular basis and it's not terrible, but the thought of not having to do whatever it is, you know, whether it's a job or any type of commitment, something that you are putting work, time, and effort into on a regular basis, and maybe there's some benefits from it, right? Maybe you get some good things out of it. Maybe it pays you well. But the thought of having to not do it at all, you're just done with it, gives you a big sigh of relief. You're just like, oh, yes, that would be awesome if I just didn't have to do that thing anymore. You should find a way to stop doing that thing in whatever way that takes. Now, in certain situations, maybe changing it up in some way. Maybe you don't have to completely stop doing it altogether, but changing some aspects of it. But for me, what I have found is that if you have that feeling, again, what I'm saying is like, just think about not having to do that particular thing. That, again, it's got some benefits. Maybe it pays you well. Maybe there's some other benefits that you get from it. Like there's a reason why you are spending your effort on this particular thing, but the thought of just not having to do it anymore gives you a big relief. A big weight comes off your shoulders. If you thought about just not having to do it at all anymore, you're done with it. You should pursue not doing that thing. Figure out how to get out of it or how to change it. And I've had a few things in my life this year and over the past few years where that's been the case, where I've been doing the thing and enjoyed it in a way, or maybe at first I really enjoyed it and maybe there were some really good benefits to the particular thing and I like the people, but it just was not for me, right? And sometimes you have to try something and give it a shot to see if it is for you, but then you know deep down whether you are actually enjoying what you're doing or not. And this is usually going to pertain to a job that I'm referencing, right? You're trading your time for compensation in some way, shape, or form. And you find yourself in that situation. I encourage you to find a way out or find a way to change it in some way so that you don't have that feeling that you want to get up and do that thing every day. Now, it's not going to be perfect. There's always going to be problems. You're always going to run into things that are hard and make whatever you're doing difficult, but that you still actually want to get up and do it. Or the thought of not doing something, you don't know, you can't see how you wouldn't do it, right? Like it's a part of you. It's a part of your life. There are pieces to it that really bring you some satisfaction. Well, keep doing that thing or find out how to do more of that thing. It sounds intuitive enough, but it was just something that really stood out for me that I'm going to try to recognize in the future when I have those feelings and maybe make some moves quicker than I have in the past. And on the note of things being difficult and there's going to be problems on everything, I have found, and I guess it's not just new to 2024, but it has stood out for me recently for sure, that running a business is really hard. And there are going to be a lot of problems that you're going to have to deal with. And the more that you expand and grow, by default, by volume, you're going to deal with more problems. And of course, you can implement strategies and training and hire people and all kinds of different things to alleviate these problems or to avoid them altogether, but there's still going to be problems if you're running a business. Probably if you're just working at a job too, but especially if you're running a business, because then almost all of the problems end up being your problem in one way or another. Again, depends on the strategy that you implement and how you train your people and how you structure your business. And you can avoid a lot of that stuff for sure, but it doesn't mean there's not going to be challenges. There's not going to be problems. They're going to be there. And, there's been days this year where I've just been really stressed out and it seems that absolutely nothing can go right. We just had one of those days the other day. Oh man, I was like, why did we even work today? It was almost pointless because we could not win at a thing. And all three of us too, we were all struggling on something. And those days happen and you're so frustrated of okay, how do I manage all of these things that are falling down around me? Not all the days are like that. And you can evaluate those problems and again implement strategies to avoid them in the future, hopefully, but there's always going to be unforeseen things. But where I'm going with this, I do have a point, is you need to accept the fact that there's going to be problems. There's never, for anyone who's run a business, not been problems. But that's kind of our expectation, especially on those days that there's lots of problems. You're just oh, why can't everything just go right? And some days, hey, everything does go right, but that's not the norm and that's not going to persist forever. You're going to have issues. Again, especially if you want to do something like we're doing, which is challenging work that other shops don't even want to deal with, there's going to be issues. And you need to accept that as part of the day and part of what you're doing. And at least taking that attitude into a day of just saying, hey, there's going to be some problems. We're going to deal with them. And then we're going to evaluate them and see, is there a way we could have avoided that problem in the future? And then if you're in the middle of that day where everything seems to be going wrong and everything you touch turns into a disaster, you're that's just the way it goes sometimes. Let's work through this with a positive attitude and a positive mindset. It's one thing that I'm really trying to implement for myself because I haven't always been that way. There have been days this year for sure that I've been in a really piss poor mood because of all of the different challenges that I was dealing with. But as I continue to learn and grow as a business owner, as a leader, as a technician, is how to, manage my own mindset and emotion during those times when everything seems to be falling down around me. Because you will get to the other side of it. That's the other thing. Is you just need to continue to push, be that leader, look for the solution, try to work through it, and you'll get to the other side. And then, hey, once you do, everything will seem twice as easy as it was prior because, hey, you dealt with the worst of the worst. So, and to be honest, what I've dealt with definitely isn't that. Things could be way worse. That's the other thing to remind yourself of hey, is this really that much of a problem or are you just having kind of a bad day? So anyways, just some notes from me as a new business owner in a growing business. The last note I have on here for 2024 is that investing in yourself is the absolute best investment that you can make. It's the biggest return. And I'm talking about dollars here. Now, time could also be put into this because, you have a couple different currencies. You have dollars and you have your time. But if you're going to invest in something, right, you take money and you're going to invest it in something with the hopes of a return, right? If I put $1 into this stock, I'm hoping for a 10% return on this dollar so that my money is making money for me, right? And there's a gazillion different ways that you can invest both your time and money. But when you look at your money, there's all kinds of different options, especially today. There's places where you can lose your money. It's gambling in a sense, because a lot of it's not guaranteed, right? And the bigger the risk, the bigger the potential reward, but that risk factor is there. But that if you really want to spend your time and money on something that is going to get you a big return, it is on yourself, right? Now, I'm not saying don't put money on the stock market or retirement plan. That's not it. But as much time and effort that you can put into yourself to improve yourself, to pay for whatever training or class or education or mentorship or coaching or whatever form that it takes, do that. Give it a try at least. Maybe not every single option out there is good. Maybe you find something and you're like, oh, this isn't really worth the money that they're charging, but go out there and do it and absorb as much of it as you can. Now, there's a ton of free resources out there as well. It's an excellent time if you want to learn about anything, but there's a lot of paid things like training events and online training applications where you can pay for specific information on particular topics, right? We got a couple sponsors on the show. You'll probably hear the ads for. That type of thing is what I'm talking about, is spend that money, go absorb whatever you can from that resource, but put the money into yourself, gamble on yourself. It's going to be the absolute 100% best return. And the reason I say that is just that I'm seeing some returns for myself in all of the time and effort that I've invested, but then also in my employees as well. We've been investing, some time and effort in training them, and we're seeing returns there as well. And I'm going to continue to do that. I want to get these guys trained so they can be as good as they possibly can. So anyways, those are my reflections for 2024. Now I'll end this with some thoughts for creating goals for 2025. Now, like I mentioned at the beginning, this isn't like a resolution thing, but that might be tied in, right? That might be kind of where the thought process starts. But again, looking back on the previous year, looking forward to the next year, we want to ask ourselves some questions when we're building these goals, things that I want to achieve by 2025. And maybe you do it in the first month, but maybe it takes half a year, 8 months, the whole year, right? It may take the whole year to accomplish, or maybe you don't even get it done in 2025, but you need to start working towards this thing. But it's a goal. It's a thing that I want to achieve by X. So looking back on the year, there's some things I noticed. Ask yourself what went well, what went poorly, and why, right? Why did the good things go well, and why did the bad things go poorly? For either one, was it something that was within my control? And what did you learn from each? Really ask yourself that. Like, hey, I was really successful in this area. Why was I successful in this area? And what did I learn from it? Did I learn anything from it? Same thing for the things that went poorly in your year. If something just really sucked, it was a real low point for you. Why did that happen? And what did you learn from it? And write this stuff down too. I actually did this in a document as I went through these, and I wrote these down for the previous year for myself, of good things, bad things, and why they happened as far as I can surmise, and what I learned from those things. The next thing is, if looking back now that it's almost New Year's 2025, if you could tell yourself January 1st, 2024, if you could tell yourself one thing, what would that be? Ask yourself that, like one piece of information that would really make your life better in the over the course of 2024. What would that one thing or that one phrase be? And consider, is it something you still might need to hear? That's partly true for me. When I wrote it down, I'm like, well, I still need to, hear that particular thing. So what would you tell yourself? January 1st, 2024, if you could go back in time. And then ask yourself, what could you have done to make this year better as a whole, right? So you take a broader perspective on things and look at the different things that went well, went bad. What could you have done to make this year better? But then also ask yourself, what could you have done to make this year worse? I think sometimes doing the inversion of the things that we want or the things that we think would be good is ask the opposite of what do we not want? Or again, what could we have done that would have made this year really bad? And sometimes that's an easy answer, but be realistic where maybe you had a choice somewhere throughout the year and you chose one path instead of the other. Well, had you picked the other path, would things have ended, much worse? And I think that's a valuable piece of information to take into the following year. If hey, I was up against this situation before and I chose to do blank. How did that turn out for me? Do I want to do the same thing or the opposite, or what are the consequences? And then take that same question, but expand it out 5 years. Okay. So again, ask yourself, what could I do now that's going to make myself happy or in a better position in 5 years? It's a little bit of a longer time frame and harder to judge exactly where you'll be at depending on your life, how 5 years from now is going to look. But what do you think you could do right now or in this year even that would make yourself 5 years down the road happy or happier or in a better position? And again, ask yourself the inverse of what could I do now or this year that would make myself unhappy 5 years down the road, that would make my position 5 years from now much less desirable? What types of things could I do or not do in order for that to happen? And again, it actually is a useful exercise to really think about that. Now, again, there's the obvious things of don't go out and get addicted to meth. That's obviously going to make your life more difficult in 5 years. But with maybe some of the more, mundane decisions or just the things that we're not doing, if you look at it on a bigger time perspective, right? Maybe you want to quit drinking pop or soda, for those of you that don't live in Minnesota. And it doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but maybe it will for you in 5 years. What if that simple decision, made a real big difference for you 5 years down the road? Some things like that definitely could. And that's where I'm going with that, is not the real obvious stuff. And you could think about that, but what are some of the decisions I could make or not make now that would make my life suck in 5 years? Okay, well, let's avoid those. Let's not do those and do the opposite of what, potentially makes my life better in 5 years. And with that, now I'm in a position to start writing some goals for this year. Now I have personal goals, I have business goals. Some of them intertwine, but I do try to keep those separate because you should have a personal life. I'm not very good at that, but I'm striving. Maybe it's one of my goals is to have a little bit more of a life outside of work. But as you're making these goals, and you can make as many or as few as you want, focus in on a couple real important things, or, create a list of 20, whatever you think is achievable. That's an important part. But for each of these goals, and this is the last part I'll have here, is to write down a goal, but then ask yourself, why do I want to achieve this goal? And don't go any further before you answer that. If you can't answer that, or you don't have a good answer, maybe reconsider. Okay, why do I really want this thing? If you don't know, maybe it's not worth pursuing or not worth pursuing yet until you understand why you want this thing, right? Okay, I want $100,000 in cash by the end. Well, why? I think you should have a really good answer for that if you're going to pursue it as a goal. I think that's important. So ask yourself the why and really think about that. And that might change some of your goals based on your answer or lack thereof for the why on each one. Once you have the why, ask yourself the how. How am I going to achieve this goal? And again, make it realistic. Like, what are you going to do to achieve this thing in 2025? And that'll take different forms depending on what it is. The final thing is, how do I track this? Or how do I confirm or verify that I actually achieve this? Or it might be partly, how do I keep myself on track throughout the year to make sure that I am still moving towards this goal, right? Some of the bigger ones that may take a year plus to achieve, I'll have something to remind you, whether it's a reminder on a calendar or some sort of app or a document that you check, a Post-it note on your mirror in your bathroom, whatever form it takes to remind you throughout the year that, like, hey, you need to, refocus or recenter yourself on this, or have some sort of metric to say, how am I moving towards this? If it's a really big goal that's not going to happen all at once, it's really good to have some measurable tool to say, okay, at least I'm moving towards it. Or maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm moving the opposite way. Why? What can I change? But you don't have anything and it's a real big goal that you're trying to hit, it's going to be tough without any measuring stick to help you get there. So how do I track this, or how do I monitor this, is also a really important one. So I invite you to do that. Spend some time with it in the next couple days before January 1st, 2025. And I spent some decent time and effort on this, and I'm excited to implement this stuff in 25. With that, I wish everybody a happy New Year's. I hope everyone is healthy, happy, and making a ton of money out there. But with that out of the way, let's get out there, start fixing the world one car at a time.